James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
Maria?
You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
Don't get me wrong, I get it. I get it. Silent Hill 2 in the 23 years it's existed has been pivotal in the Silent Hill franchise, hands down. So I understand when people can't help but go back to it as the fallback best Silent Hill ever. However, years and years later, and theory after theory sandwiched on top of themselves, I think after speaking with my wife, I've not only figured out a theory that works, it could essentially be the best way to do the remake as well. Something that's a little more coherent, something you wouldn't have to piece together, because the biggest issue was, what are we going to do about all the unanswered questions from Silent Hill 2 once we do this remake? And I'm sure Bloober, in their ever-loving knowledge of the game and their fan base and all that good stuff, never stopped to think about that as they were trying to make something in their own name and in their own image. Kudos to them for stepping into the mantle of something so huge, but you're still going to have to answer those questions. Essentially, you're going to have to answer the questions that Konami forgot to answer. And I do pity Bloober for that, because whatever they add, it will either be met with one of two outcomes. Either it will be met with great applause, or it will be met with boos. So I submit to you this. Perhaps the best way to look at this would be from an entirely different perspective altogether. And that perspective, well, is that every single person in the Silent Hill 2 game is simply not real. This video proposes that James Sunderland suffers from dissociative identity disorder, and the side characters he encounters are not independent entities but manifestations of his fragmented psyche. For those that do not know, dissociative identity disorder, or DID, is a mental health condition where a person has two or more distinct personalities or personality states. These identities can control a person's behavior at different times and can be accompanied by changes in memory, thinking, behavior, and other symptoms. Silent Hill, with its supernatural ability to bring inner turmoil into physical reality, creates these characters to force James to confront and reconcile with the guilt over his wife Mary's death. As James comes to terms with different aspects of his psyche, the characters either disappear from the plot or meet their demise, with Maria being the exception as she serves to continually torment James. And what better way to kick this off than to start with the very first encounter in Silent Hill 2 with Angela. Angela Orozco is a young woman of Hispanic descent, around 19 years old, who's experienced a life of severe trauma and abuse. In Silent Hill 2, Angela is depicted with long hair that often hangs on her face, obscuring her features and kind of adding to the overall sense of vulnerability and fragility. She's anxious, fearful, depressive, hopeless, distrustful, guarded, but most importantly, there is a angle of self-loathing that becomes more and more evident the further you get into the plot line, and we'll get into that in a moment. My point is, the culmination of every part of her character all centers around one subject title, and that is despair. See, it's my belief that Angela represents the depths of despair and hopelessness within James. Her tragic background of abuse and her suicidal tendencies mirror James' own subconscious desires for self-destruction. James' first encounter with Angela takes place in a cemetery, a symbolic location that foreshadows the themes of death and mourning that permeate within their relationship. Angela is seen searching for her mother, lost and confused. This initial meeting sets the tone for her role in the narrative as a mirror to James' own sense of loss and search for resolution. The cemetery, a place of finality, suggests that Angela's presence is closely tied to the inevitability of confronting one's past and the associated despair. I believe Angela was aptly titled Despair for a reason. I believe her only purpose in the tour of Silent Hill is to show James that this is what the end appears to be, with no one at his side, with no one to find to support him in all the depression going on. He simply has to look at what he has ahead of him, and that seems to be nothing, filling with a great sense of dread and despair. Throughout Silent Hill 2, Angela's interactions with James are laden with symbolism. When they meet in Blue Creek Apartments, Angela's encounter with a distorted mirror reveals her distorted self-image and deep self-loathing. This moment reflects James' own distorted perception of himself and his actions. Angela's reoccurring presence and struggle with her monster abstract daddy, which represents her father's abuse, serves as a poignant reminder that James needs to confront his own inner demons. And his time was ticking, essentially. Angela was further along in the reflection as eventually she just came to exist and understand what she had done. She had given up. She had hit a breaking point, which is why Angela's final scene is perhaps the most telling of her symbolic purpose. In the Lakeview Hotel, Angela stands on a burning staircase surrounded by flames. She remarks that the fires are always there for her, a manifestation of her personal hell and unending suffering. This scene is a powerful representation of Angela's eternal despair and the consuming nature of her trauma. Her decision to walk into the flames signifies her surrender to this despair, unable to find a way out. For James, this encounter is a turning point. Angela's acceptance of her fate serves as a stark contrast to his own journey. While Angela succumbs to her despair, James is presented with a choice: to continue down a path of self-destruction, or to confront and overcome his inner turmoil. Angela's disappearance into the flames symbolizes the necessity for James to reject this aspect of his psyche to move forward. It's a moment of profound realization that he must not allow his guilt and despair to consume him in the same way if he intends on seeing Mary. Anyway, Angela's role in Silent Hill 2 is integral to James's journey towards self-acceptance and reconciliation. She embodies the despair and hopelessness that James feels, forcing him to confront these emotions head-on. Angela's tragic end serves as a crucial turning point, emphasizing the need for James to overcome his own self-destructive tendencies. By witnessing Angela's descent into her personal hell, James is provided with a powerful lesson on the consequences of failing to confront and integrate one's inner demons. In conclusion, Angela Orozco's character is a vital piece of the psychological puzzle that is Silent Hill 2, but more so James. Her interactions with James highlight the profound depths of despair and trauma within his psyche, and her ultimate fate serves as a catalyst for his own journey towards healing. Angela's presence and tragic end underscore the importance of confronting and accepting all parts of oneself to achieve psychological wholeness, making her a pivotal element in understanding the true depth of James Sunderland's character. It should be noted, it was easy, in my opinion, it was easy for James to disregard Angela and kind of just tell her to be on the more positive side of things as she proceeded to walk down a path that obviously led to where it led to. He spent a lot of time trying to convince her otherwise. Hey, you should get up. Hey, you should put that knife down. Things of that sort. You should get out of that fire. He tried his damnedest, and this was thoroughly a shot-for-shot representation of the despair he was feeling towards pretty much the entirety of having Mary at his side and dying. Hopelessness seemed like a very, very comfortable area for him to stay in. However, due to the lack of responsibility he took in the entire scenario, it shows that he's detached himself further than he thought. If Angela is to be a shot-for-shot representation of the despair that James has or feels, it had ended itself as it ascended the staircase and into the fire, accepting what it had seen and accepting where it was going and accepting its fate. Angela simply makes the statement that it's always like this, further confirming that there was no longer anything to be afraid of. Ultimately, Angela's role in Silent Hill 2 is integral to James's journey towards self-acceptance and reconciliation. She embodies the despair and hopelessness that James feels, forcing him to confront these emotions head-on. Angela's tragic end serves as a crucial turning point, emphasizing the need for James to overcome his own self-destructive tendencies. By witnessing Angela's descent into her personal hell, James is provided with a powerful lesson on the consequences of failing to confront and integrate one's inner demons. In conclusion, Angela Orozco's character is a vital piece of the psychological puzzle that is Silent Hill 2. Her interactions with James highlight the profound depths of despair and trauma within his psyche, and her ultimate fate serves as a catalyst for his own journey towards healing. Angela's presence and tragic end underscore the importance of confronting and accepting all parts of oneself to achieve psychological wholeness, making her a pivotal element in understanding the true depths of James Sunderland's character. Now, next up is Maria, and Maria by far is the most complex and persistent manifestation in Silent Hill, embodying James' denial and his idealized version of Mary. Unlike the real Mary, who was suffering from a terminal illness and became distant and bitter due to her prolonged suffering, Maria is vibrant, healthy, and sexually inviting. Her existence is a direct contradiction to the reality of Mary's condition and personality, serving as a projection of James' deepest desires and his refusal to accept the painful truth of his wife's death. Maria's character is introduced early in the game, immediately striking James with her uncanny resemblance to Mary, yet with notable differences in demeanor and attire. This contrast highlights James' inner conflict, his longing for the past and his denial of the harsh reality. Maria's flirtatious and provocative behavior stands in a stark comparison to the memory of his sick and dying Mary, representing the life and relationship James wished he could have. Throughout the game, Maria's repeated deaths serve as a crucial symbolic purpose. Each time Maria dies, it forces James to confront the futility of his denial and the impossibility of resurrecting the idealized image of Mary. Despite these repeated losses, Maria's reappearances signify James' deep-seated denial and his reluctance to let go of comforting illusions. This cycle of death and rebirth underscores the psychological struggle James faces as he grapples with the grief and guilt. Maria's role is also essential in tormenting James, acting as both a reminder of his failure to save Mary and as a projection of his self-punishment. Her existence continuously tests James' resolve and his ability to differentiate between reality and illusion. The repeated trauma of witnessing Maria's death forces James to relive the pain and guilt associated with Mary's passing, pushing him closer to the truth he's been avoiding. Moreover, Maria serves as a mirror to James' psyche, reflecting his deepest fears and desires. Her presence in the game can be seen as Silent Hill's way of compelling James to confront his unresolved emotions. Each encounter with Maria forces James to question his memories, his actions, and ultimately his responsibility in Mary's death. Her allure and the emotional turmoil she causes highlight the complexity of James' denial, making it clear that the journey through Silent Hill is as much about facing his inner demons as it is about navigating the physical horrors of the town. In the game's multiple endings, Maria's fate varies, further emphasizing her role in James' psychological journey. In some endings, James' failure to fully confront his denial results in him leaving Silent Hill with Maria, suggesting that he remains trapped in his delusion. In other endings, James comes to terms with his actions and the reality of Mary's death, leading to Maria's final disappearance and symbolizing his acceptance and the beginning of the true healing. Ultimately, Maria's repeated deaths and her persistent presence in Silent Hill serve to illustrate the powerful grip of denial and the lengths to which the human mind will go to avoid painful truths. Through Maria, Silent Hill forces James to face a reality he has long since denied, driving home the game's central themes of guilt, grief, and the quest for redemption. You have to remember that despite the fact that Maria had her own DLC or add-on or expansion pack or however you want to look at it, despite the fact of all this, you have to remember that I'm not proposing that this is a split personality disorder and he's simply talking in his own head the whole time. Silent Hill went ahead and dialed it up to 11 as they turned the personalities in his mind, or the variances in his mind, they've turned them into physical constructs, meaning everything that embodied his feelings on X appears as a physical body, and that's why we get Born from a Wish scenario. The Born from a Wish scenario shows what it is like to be a construct in its adolescence. You watch as this construct begins slowly forming, essentially being born. Seeing this in action, seeing this as it goes through its song and dance to become Maria, you now see what it is like to have been a life created by Silent Hill rather than a natural born life or even an actual sentient life. It's a very dark and often sad experience as you watch this being come to life and become something that they're not fully aware of. They have questions in the back of their mind, and some of them deduce and put together what they've become or what they are, but for the most part, they truly believe they are alive. And if they are simply alive at the hands of another character in the story, they have no knowing of that unless they were specifically designed for that reason. For instance, Pyramid Head. Now, Pyramid Head stands as one of the most iconic and terrifying figures in Silent Hill 2, embodying the profound and inescapable guilt that haunts James Sunderland. This monstrous figure, with its grotesque appearance and relentless pursuit, symbolizes the darkest and most punishing aspect of James's psyche. Pyramid Head's role in the narrative is crucial for understanding James' internal struggle and his journey towards self-reconciliation. Pyramid Head is not just a mere monster, it is a physical manifestation of James' overwhelming guilt of the death of his wife Mary. Throughout the game, Pyramid Head appears during moments of extreme psychological stress and guilt, forcing James to confront the reality of his actions. The creature's presence is a constant reminder that James cannot escape from his past, no matter how hard he tries to suppress or deny it. Pyramid Head's relentless pursuit of James throughout the game highlights the inescapable nature of guilt. Unlike other creatures in Silent Hill that can be avoided or defeated temporarily, Pyramid Head reappears again and again, underscoring the idea that guilt cannot simply be defeated or forgotten. It must be confronted and reconciled. The relentless pursuit serves to push James towards a confrontation with the truth about Mary's death and his own role in it. The encounters with Pyramid Head are more than just physical battles, they're psychological confrontations. Each encounter forces James to face his guilt head-on, chipping away at his denial and self-deception. The creature's intimidating presence and the dread that it inspires in James reflects the depth of his internal struggle. These confrontations are necessary for James to peel back layers of his denial and come to terms with the reality of his actions. In the climactic moments of the game, James faces Pyramid Head one final time. This encounter is pivotal as it represents the culmination of James' internal battle with his own guilt. Pyramid Head's final act of self-destruction, where it impales itself, is highly symbolic. This act signifies that James has finally acknowledged and accepted his guilt, rendering the physical manifestation of his guilt unnecessary. The creature's self-destruction indicates that James has reached a point of internal resolution. He no longer needs to be punished by the relentless force because he has come to terms with his responsibility for Mary's death. Pyramid Head is a crucial character in Silent Hill 2, representing the profound and inescapable guilt that haunts James Sunderland. Through its design, behavior, and relentless pursuit, Pyramid Head serves as a constant reminder of James' need for punishment and his struggle with accepting the guilt. The encounters with Pyramid Head force James to confront his darkest aspects of his psyche, pushing him towards self-reconciliation. Ultimately, the self-destruction of Pyramid Head symbolizes James' acceptance of his guilt and the resolution of his need for self-punishment, marking a significant step in his journey towards a psychological wholeness. This intricate portrayal of guilt and punishment solidifies Pyramid Head as a central figure to Silent Hill 2's exploration of the human condition. Eddie Dombrowski stands as a stark reflection of James Sunderland's latent anger and repressed violent tendencies. Initially introduced as a seemingly harmless character, Eddie's transformation into a figure of madness and aggression mirrors the dark potential within James himself. Eddie's arc begins with him appearing vulnerable and misunderstood, echoing the way James might see himself at times, misunderstood and struggling with inner turmoil. Eddie's initial portrayal as a victim of bullying and social ostracism allows players to empathize with him, much like James' initial sympathy towards Eddie. However, as the game progresses, Eddie's true nature is revealed. His escalating violence and the justification of his actions, murdering those who mocked or wronged him, serve as a dark reflection of what James could have become if he continues to deny his culpability and allows his suppressed anger to fester. Eddie's descent into madness and his increasing brutality underscore the potential consequence of unaddressed rage. His character is a cautionary tale of what happens when anger and blame are externalized rather than confronted. Eddie's justification for his murders, claiming that he was pushed to his limits, parallels James' own potential for justifying his own actions regarding Mary. This comparison forces James to recognize the latent anger within himself and the destructive path it could lead him down if he continues to avoid responsibility for his actions. The pivotal moment of Eddie's arc occurs when James is forced to confront him in the meat locker. This confrontation is symbolic in multiple levels, really. The setting, a cold, confined space filled with hanging carcasses, evokes a sense of death and decay, mirroring the internal decay caused by an unchecked rage. During their confrontation, Eddie's accusations that James is just like him hit close to home, forcing James to reflect on his own anger he harbors within himself. As the confrontation escalates, James is left with no choice but to kill Eddie in self-defense. This act is not just a physical battle, but a symbolic rejection of the path Eddie represents. By killing Eddie, James is metaphorically rejecting part of himself that seeks to externalize blame and resort to violence. This moment is a crucial step in James's journey towards self-awareness and acceptance of his own culpability. Eddie's death serves as a turning point for James. It signifies a rejection of denial and the acceptance of his own darker impulses. Eddie's violent outburst and his ultimate demise forced James to confront the reality of what he could have become if he continued to deny his role in Mary's death. This moment of clarity is essential for James's progression, allowing him to move forward in his journey through Silent Hill with a deeper understanding of himself and a capacity for both good and evil. By rejecting the path Eddie represents, James begins the process of integrating this aspect of his psyche. He acknowledges his potential for violence and anger, but chooses a different path, one of acceptance and responsibility. Eddie's death is not just the end of a character, but a symbolic death of a part of James that he must let go of to heal and move towards redemption. Eddie Dombrowski's character serves as a powerful manifestation of James Sunderland's repressed rage and latent violent tendencies. Through their interactions, Eddie forces James to confront and reject the destructive path of externalizing blame and embracing violence. Eddie's descent into madness and eventual death are crucial in James' journey towards self-awareness and redemption. By facing and overcoming the darkness within himself, symbolized by Eddie, James takes a significant step towards accepting his guilt and moving closer to the truth about Mary's death. This confrontation and its resolution are essential elements in the broader narrative of Silent Hill 2, illustrating the complex interplay of denial, rage, and the quest for self-forgiveness. Okay, so Laura is introduced as an 8-year-old girl who knew Mary during her time in the hospital. Unlike any of the other characters, Laura is not haunted by the town's malevolent manifestations. This distinction highlights her purity and untainted perception of reality. In James' mind, Laura represents an unblemished memory of Mary, one that's not clouded by the guilt and sorrow that he harbors. Laura's presence forces James to confront the reality of Mary and who she was, rather than the distorted image that he's constructed through his guilt and denial. Throughout Silent Hill 2, Laura's actions and demeanor contrast sharply with the corrupted and tortured nature of the other characters. She moves through the town unaffected by the monsters that plague James, symbolizing a world untouched by guilt and sin. This stark contrast underscores the depth of James' internal corruption and the innocence he has lost. Laura's innocence also serves to amplify James's guilt, as she reminds him of the purity and simplicity of life before it was tainted by his actions. Laura's interactions with James often reveal her childlike innocence and lack of understanding of the darker aspects of the world. She frequently expresses frustration and confusion over the behaviors of adults, including James and Mary. This portrayal of Laura as a quintessential child sympathizes empathizes rather, the idealized version of childhood that James longs for, a time when life was simpler and free of burdens he now carries. Laura's purity and straightforwardness forced James to reflect on his own lost innocence and the complexities that have overtaken his life. Laura's relationship with Mary is depicted as genuine and loving, free from any complications that define James' memories. Mary cared deeply for Laura, as evidenced by the letter Mary wrote to her, which Laura shows to James. This bond highlights a side of Mary that James has overshadowed with his guilt and self-loathing. By interacting with Laura, James is reminded of Mary's capacity for love and kindness, helping to separate his wife's true character from the guilt-ridden memories he's been fixated on. Laura's eventual departure from the plot signifies a pivotal moment in James' journey. As he comes to terms with the guilt and begins to reconcile with the true memory of Mary, Laura's role in the story reaches its conclusion. Her exit symbolizes James' acceptance of the loss of innocence and the acceptance of Mary's death as it truly happened, rather than through the distorted lens of his guilt. Laura's innocence has served its purpose in guiding James towards a clearer, more honest understanding of the past. Laura's presence in Silent Hill 2 is a powerful reminder of innocence lost and the purity that James once knew. She acts as a counterbalance to the darkness that James must navigate, highlighting his guilt and the complexity of his emotions. Through Laura, James is forced to confront the unattained truth of his memories and the genuine affection that existed between Mary and those she cared for. Laura's eventual disappearance marks a critical step in James' journey towards reconciliation, allowing him to accept the reality of his actions and move forward. In this way, Laura's character is not just a child wandering through Silent Hill, but a crucial element in James' path to self-understanding and acceptance. In the end, James being summoned to Silent Hill was a personal pilgrimage, one that required a lot of self-reflection, but even more so, required him to forgive himself, the situation, and everything else in between. Much of the fans have chosen the in-water ending as the most canonical ending, as well as Konami and even Masahiro Ito stating so, giving James the ability to see his wife one last time, apologize, tell the truth about what had happened and how he had felt, and watch her die once more. Only this time, he had intended on having this end on his terms. His and Mary's terms, to be fairly honest. The in-water ending has him say goodbye as he places his wife in the car. Moments later, with a bit of monologue, James takes the car right over the edge and into Toluca Lake, where he and Mary can be together forever at the bottom of the lake. This was the intended ending as well as the intended plan for James all along. However, this plan could not come to fruition as long as he had so many skeletons in the closet and so many things impeding his path. Masahiro Ito even stated so, as it is revealed later on in the years after the game had long since been out, that Mary was actually in the back seat of James's vehicle the entire time. Meaning he had fully intended on coming to say goodbye to her here, it was just a matter of how. And once he got to Silent Hill had the plans in store for him to set up an elaborate way for him to say goodbye. However, it was going to come with a lot of trials, and it was going to come with a lot of situations for him to conquer. And if he hadn't, he would have died there and not been given the chance to say goodbye. So, while Silent Hill does have a very ominous and evil force behind it generally, this was foreseeably the most positive of all of the endings, despite the tragic ending connected to it. And the plan was very simple all along, and that was find the broken man, and every part of his mind split into multiple characters so that he may come face to face with each and every one of them. Reconciling and integrating with all of these different facets of his personality, all in an attempt to seek forgiveness and redemption, even if it were his last days. And seemingly by the way he had planned everything out, it had looked like that was the goal. He wanted to say his last goodbyes to his wife the right way. He wanted to confess and admit everything to her and only her, before inevitably finding rest with Mary in their special place.